Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Touchdown Tuesdays, the official football podcast of Brew Sports. I'm your co-host, Ian DeMars, along with Ryan Solomon, who is actually not with us this week. He is actually down in South Carolina. Ryan, how's South Carolina treating you so far?
It's great. There's actually warm temperatures. The sun has been out pretty much every day. It's just been great. I do not want to go back.
Yeah, I won't blame you. The weather in Wisconsin starting to get warmer, but obviously not as warm as I've seen on the from Weather Channel app in South Carolina. So you're definitely enjoying the nice weather. I'll be enjoying the nice weather soon as I head to Florida. But we won't talk about that now. So let's talk about obviously the big news of the day in NFL, and obviously that has to be free agency. We have a lot to discuss in regards to free agency. A lot of expected signings to happen once the new league year officially begins tomorrow. But first, I think we know what we have to talk about. There were two major trades that happened this past week, and I think we need to start off with the most recent one, and it has to be Odell Beckham Jr. in a blockbuster trade going from the Giants to the Cleveland Browns, teaming up with his former college mate Jarvis Landry, and in return, the Cleveland Browns will be giving up safety Jabril Peppers, the number 17 overall pick, and a third-round pick in this year's draft. So obviously this is a pretty big deal. There are rumors of a trade possibly happening. And Ryan, what are your thoughts on this trade? Oh, it looks like we did lose Ryan here for a second. So I'll give my take on this first while we wait for Ryan to reconnect. This is a pretty big, significant deal for both teams. You look at the Cleveland Browns, you obviously see they're going in a huge direction. They're looking to win now. I'm not sure if they're looking to possibly think Super Bowl now. Obviously, this team's coming off of a huge upgrade in their season this past year. And I think we did just get Ryan back. Are you there, Ryan?
Yep. I came back. The internet connection here is not spectacular.
Yeah, I know you had said that before we got on. So hopefully we're able to keep you on as long as we're able to. But I was just kind of telling the viewers that basically this is a huge upgrade, I think, for both teams. You look at the Browns, obviously this puts them in win now mode. I don't necessarily think they're a Super Bowl contending team right now, but this obviously I think makes them the favorite not only to win the AFC North, but makes them a pretty good contender in the AFC. And you look at the Giants, they get a couple of nice pieces. They get Jabril Peppers, a promising safety and defensive player, special teams player as well for the Giants. And then you also get another draft pick, a 17 pick in the first round, and then a third-round pick. I think these moves are huge for both teams. The Giants are desperately looking to rebuild a little bit with some of the moves they've made recently, and they're also looking to get back as much as they can in return. But the Browns, they are looking to win now. They're looking to do whatever they can. There was another trade that these two teams actually did earlier, or I should say late last week, swapping Olivier Vernon to the Browns for guard Kevin Zeitler to the Giants. Ironically, that was on Kevin Zeitler's birthday as well. But I think this shows that Cleveland is in win now mode. They know this is their time. Pittsburgh is starting to fall back. They don't no longer have Antonio Brown, which we talked about on the set. They are not going to be getting Le'Veon Bell back, so they're on the decline. The Ravens are kind of in an iffy situation. We don't know what's going to happen with them. And then the Bengals, we also don't know what's really going to happen there. So this is Cleveland's division to lose now with the moves that they made. This is a huge win so far at the beginning of free agency with not only the signings, but the trades that they've made.
Yeah, I would say that's true. And the big question about this trade, though, is what kind of talent you get in Odell Beckham Jr., but what kind of personality are you bringing into your locker room? So that was really the big problem with him in New York. No one ever questioned his talent. No one ever questioned his ability to do amazing things with the ball in his hand. However, when he was not winning, when the team wasn't winning, when he wasn't getting targets, all of a sudden there was a lot of self-destruction going on there and destroying the team from within. And that was really the big reason why the Giants wanted to shop him around. And we saw the same thing with Antonio Brown. So now the Browns, a team that was kind of building through the draft, They got some good players in free agency the past couple of seasons. They're starting to build a really strong core of players. And after bringing in Baker Mayfield, there's some promise they could have found a quarterback. You add in this piece that wants to win now and wants the spotlight on him with a team that overall is very young. You wonder how that sort of influence is going to play into that locker room and factor into how the team functions. Now, I'm not saying that it's a bad trade, but I just think the Giants actually got a better end of the deal here, because if you look at that Antonio Brown trade too, that was a 3rd and a 5th round pick. The Giants actually got a solid player and a nice draft pick out of it, which is better than you saw for Antonio Brown. So I do think the Giants came out of this better off than the Browns, even though on paper it looks like it's a huge deal for the Browns to get this kind of offensive weapon.
Yeah, looking at it, Cleveland, they have a lot of young pieces now. Odell Beckham Jr. are still young. Jarvis Landry is still young. Obviously, Baker Mayfield was just a rookie last year. Same with Nick Chubb. They signed Kareem Hunt, who, if he does end up being eligible to play at some point, is still very young. They have the tight end David Njoku, who's also just coming, or is very young as well. This team is stacked. They have lots of young talent, and they may have given up some good pieces that probably could have helped them up and had veteran leadership. But I think that they're not, obviously this year is not going to be a Super Bowl year for them. But with these pieces, if they can get them all to work together 2 or 3 years down the line, this team is going to be in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I guess the other big question here is, can Baker Mayfield lead a team in the NFL that actually has expectations on it? Last year, we thought the Browns might be better than the year before, and it's really hard not to be better than 0-16. And now after we've seen them do some good things and they have some good players on the team, can Baker Mayfield actually rise to the occasion and avoid that sophomore slump that a lot of NFL players experience? So it's going to be on him this year. He has no excuse not to succeed, because he did some good things last year, and now he has 2 amazing wide receivers that are probably both in the top 15 of the NFL. So it's going to be on him to see if he can catapult this team forward to the next level. And this year, I'm actually still probably going to pick Pittsburgh to win the division. But I think it is going to be a step forward for Cleveland.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens there. I think it could possibly be. The AFC North has always been an interesting division to look at, but I'm very interested to see how it looks this upcoming year. Pittsburgh not winning the division last year, still losing some pieces. Obviously, Cleveland rising, Baltimore making some moves, but also losing some players. And Cincinnati, you could say, is at the bottom of the division at this point. That'll be the interesting division to see. But let's stick in that division for a second and talk about the Antonio Brown trade. So obviously, he was traded. He got traded to Oakland. He's going to be playing for John Gruden. The Raiders give up a 3rd and a 5th round pick, I believe it was, for Antonio Brown. I want to give your thoughts on this first before I go off on this.
Well, to me, that sounds like a fire sale. That's like, we need to move this guy now, and apparently that was the best offer, with a 3rd and a 5th. I thought they were at least going to get a 1st-round pick. This was a guy that was a top player in the NFL for the past 3 seasons, a guy that made huge plays on offense.
Yeah, and it looks like we did temporarily lose Ryan for a second. We're going to hope that he can get back on soon to discuss the Antonio Brown situation. But, I mean, the reason why I was going to let him go on first is because I really don't know what to think about this if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers. You could have easily gotten a 1st-round pick for him. I guarantee you some team had a better offer than the Oakland Raiders. This was a terrible trade for the Steelers. Not getting a 1st-round pick, you get a couple picks, but you don't even get a 2nd-round pick. And I think we did just get Ryan back on, if I'm correct.
Yep. What was the last thing you heard me say?
I heard you say something about, I believe that they were just basically getting whatever they could, even if it wasn't that much. I was about to go on my tangent, but I'll let you continue with what you were going to say first.
Well, that was pretty much the gist of it. And I was just curious as to why he went for so much less than Odell Beckham Jr. did. And you see a guy that for most of his career wasn't really a toxic player. He just made big plays. He didn't really talk that much compared to some of the other top-tier receivers. And to only get a 3rd and a 5th round pick, I think, is a big-time loss And on the Raiders side, this is a great building block for their franchise because they just got rid of Amari Cooper and now got a first-round when they only have to give up a 3 and a 5 for one of the best receivers in the NFL. So John Gruden now suddenly looks like a genius, and that Raiders ownership looks like a genius for shipping off Amari Cooper and now finding a way to get an even better piece in place at that same position.
Looking at this, obviously we know the Steelers lost this trade by not really getting much back in return. I look at it as the fact that they don't want to see Antonio Brown succeed. They're expecting him to not do that well in Oakland. You could have traded him to San Francisco, which had money, but I don't think they want to trade him there because of the fact that they would play at some point during the regular season, this upcoming season, and there's a better longevity for him to have a great career in Oakland, or not Oakland, but San Francisco. You look at Green Bay, could have been an example, but Green Bay, you put him on that team, and they could possibly be a Super Bowl team. I think they don't want to see Antonio Brown win. They don't want to see him have much success. So they're willing to give up anything to get him, or to get rid of him. And I guarantee you there were better offers on the table. The fact that you only got a 3rd and a 5th round pick tells me that they really didn't care about Antonio Brown, which, I mean, they have the right to think that after some of the actions that he's had, not just this past year, but over the past few years on and off the field. They don't want to see him succeed. So that's why they traded him to Oakland, where, Oakland's not really going to have much success this year. They're planning to have success once they go to Las Vegas in a couple of years, or not after this next season. They don't really want anything to do with Antonio Brown. They were wanting to do whatever they could to get rid of him, even if it meant not getting much in return. They knew that they lost this trade when they made the deal. They didn't care. They just don't want to see Antonio Brown succeed, and they have the right to think that. But you have to think about your franchise yourself. You have to get the best possible deal for Antonio Brown. The fact that you only got a 3rd and a 5th round pick for him, and you're not going to get anything for Le'Veon Bell because of him going to free agency is preposterous. They blown these 2 deals, and because of this is why I don't think they're going to be a good team next year.
Well, I think they are still going to be fine without these players because they have good replacements for them. They have Juju Smith-Schuster, and then they have James Conner. And these guys showed that they can step up in the absence of either of these 2 players and still produce. I mean, at some point, Le'Veon Bell was, he was good out of college, but he wasn't necessarily pegged to be an immediate superstar. And Antonio Brown was kind of the same. They sort of came out of nowhere. And the Steelers have a good enough system in place that they always seem to be able to get another player who's next in line. So you remember they had Santonio Holmes, they had Mike Wallace, and they let these guys go, and they were just as big as Antonio Brown at the time. So I think that the Steelers do somewhat know what they're doing, even though I do think they butchered the deals with these 2 players. They did not get nearly as much as they could have possibly gotten. But I think what we saw is what you said, is they just wanted to wash their hands of this situation. That's what they're going to do. They're going to take as much as they can and ship them to a team that they probably don't have to worry about seeing in the playoffs for a while.
I'm going to give you a hot take right now because of this. Because when I saw the news of this trade, I just felt sick just because Pittsburgh blew this opportunity. They wanted to get rid of him. But the fact they could have got so much more. I'm saying this right now. They're not going to win more than 6 games next year. And because if they would have got more pieces in return, they could have been just fine. But because they didn't get the best pieces in return, they're not going to be a 500 team. They could possibly be the worst team in that division. I don't think they're going to be. I still think Cincinnati has some things to resolve in that team. And looking at all of Baltimore's loss, they could even fall a little bit. But I don't see this team now after this move winning more than 6 games.
I think they'll win more than 6 games. I think they'll bounce back better than people expect. They still have Ben Roethlisberger, who's won multiple championships. They have a decent team still, in my opinion. I think they have enough pieces to win over 6 games. I see them more as like 8-8, 9-7, possibly sneaking into the playoffs.
Okay, that's something I have to keep an eye out for. But I don't know. I feel like a couple months down the line, I might regret saying this, but I just think after this week, after seeing this, that's just kind of my immediate reaction, is that this team's not going to be where they could be with what they got in return. But as we had mentioned at the beginning of the show, free agency, the talks had just begun. So, Ryan, are you ready for me to go through all these rapid signings that are expected to be official starting tomorrow?
Yeah, let's hear it. There's been a bunch.
Yeah, there are plenty of new players going to new teams. We'll start off with those ones first. First one for Danny Amendola, formerly with the Dolphins, signs a one-year deal with the Lions. Ryan, feel free to stop me at any point if you want to give a comment on it. We got the Malik Jackson, formerly with the Jags, signs a 3-year, $30 million deal with the Eagles. Patriots tackle Trent Brown will now be in Oakland, where he gets a 4-year deal over $66 million. Quan Alexander, former linebacker for the Bucks, gets a 4-year deal with the 49ers. Former cornerback of the Texans, Kevin Johnson, signs with the Buffalo Bills. Cornerback Justin Coleman, formerly with the Seahawks, gets the richest nickel cornerback deal ever as he signs a 4-year deal with the Lions for $36 million. Landon Collins, who was not franchise tagged by the Giants, signs with division rival Washington for 6 years and $84 million.
I think that one was interesting because we talked about Landon Collins a couple weeks ago, and it was very strange for the Giants to not even try to bring him back, and then he just walks on to a division rival team. I think that's an interesting one. I was thinking there was going to be a bit more of a bidding war for Landon Collins.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too, because remember the Redskins, they traded for HaHa Clinton-Dix, who I believe is now a free agent. Not sure what he could possibly sign, but this just tells you that they completely moved on, and I'm not sure if they thought that they won that trade now with Green Bay.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay, moving on, we saw former Patriots defensive end Trey Flowers gets a big deal with the Detroit Lions, rejoining Matt Patricia over there. 5 years. It's reportedly expected to be between $80 to $85 million. That's a big move to rebolster that defense.
Yeah, that is. And I think that's one thing that was shocking, too, to me, is that there were players that were kind of mid-level that got huge deals, like way over what you would expect. It was just about every person that was signed got some sort of monstrous deal for their value.
Yeah, I definitely be looking at a lot of these numbers. Numbers I would not expect from some of these players. We do see that the oldest running back in the NFL, Frank Gore, formerly with the Dolphins, will be back another year. He signed a 1-year, $2 million deal with the Buffalo Bills. Former Steelers tight end Jesse James signed a deal with the Detroit Lions. Jameson Crowder, formerly with the Redskins, signed a deal with the Jets for 3 years. A big deal we had talked about before, but it seems official now. Nick Foles is going to be signing with the Jags, 4 years, $88 million, Ryan.
That's a big deal. I mean, he did win a championship and take the team to the playoffs again and was Super Bowl MVP. But it seems like he is probably the least hyped up Super Bowl MVP quarterback that's ever been on the market.
Yeah, that's something we'll have to keep an eye out for. We haven't necessarily seen him play a full season as a starting quarterback, so it'll be interesting to see what happens now that he's going to get the reins in Jacksonville. We saw the Bills sign a tight end, Tyler Kroft, originally from the Bengals for 3 years. Adam Humphries, former wide receiver for the Bucks, signs with the Titans for 4 years, $36 million. Seahawks backup Mike Davis signs with the Chicago Bears. Patriots former tight end Dwayne Allen signs a 2-year deal with the Dolphins. The Honey Badger, Tyrann Mathieu, people thought he was going to go back to Houston. No, he's going to Kansas City for 3 years, $42 million. Devin Funchess, a guy who started to lose time in Carolina last year, gets a 1-year, $10 million deal with the Indianapolis Colts. We saw Chiefs center Mitch Morse get a deal with the Bills for 4 years, $44.5 million. Former Texans defensive back Kareem Jackson signs with the Broncos for 3 years and $33 million. LaMarcus Joyner, formerly with the Rams, the safety, signs a 4-year deal with the Oakland Raiders. We saw Jawan James, a tackle originally with Miami, signed with the Broncos for 4 years. C.J. Mosley got a huge deal with the Jets, formerly the Ravens linebacker, 5 years and $85 million. What are your thoughts on that deal?
You can tell that the Jets are trying to bring in pieces on their defense because they did have another deal that fell through that we'll get to a little bit later. I don't know if CJ Mosley warrants that kind of money and that sort of a long deal. I don't see him as that kind of explosive player right now in his career, but it shows that the Jets are trying their best to get that defense to a level that can be respectable.
Yeah, he's had a really good career so far with Baltimore. A lot of people thought he was going to stay. So it's a little bit surprising, but I'm guessing the money was there in New York, and that's why he took it.
And when you see the guys that go where the money is instead of going where they actually want to be, you end up with some of these Albert Haynesworth situations where that player just does not pan out once they get that big deal.
Yep, that's true. And we'll be talking about that later when we talk about some of the releases in the NFL from this past week. Some more deals that happened. Sheldon Richardson, formerly with the Vikings, signs a 3-year deal with the Cleveland Browns. Former Ravens linebacker Terrell Suggs signs a 1-year deal with the Arizona Cardinals. And now we get to the talk that we kind of like to talk about. It has to do with the Green Bay Packers. After going dead silent in the first day of free agent talks, they get 4 players in day 2. They signed former Ravens linebacker Zadarius Smith. They also signed former Redskins linebacker Preston Smith, so they get 2 Smiths and both play linebacker. They also got safety from the Chicago Bears, Adrian Amos, and then they also signed an offensive lineman formerly with the Broncos, Billy Turner. Which one of these was the best steal, you think, for Green Bay?
I think Adrian Amos was probably the best deal, and any piece that you can take from the Bears defense that was so dominant last year is a solid move. The other players, I'm not super crazy about, especially for the amounts of money that they got paid. Those didn't stand out to me as much. I think Adrian Amos is a solid player, and they really needed help at safety because they actually had to move Tramon Williams to that position last year. So it's been rough in that defensive backfield, and they needed help there. I know they've been looking for linebackers to kind of fill the shoes that Clay Matthews is going to leave behind when he presumably leaves. So that probably explains the 2 linebackers. But I don't know. These weren't really the big blockbuster deals that I was hoping for, but hopefully they'll prove to be solid. It was nice to see the Packers actually active in free agency this time.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that point. Looking at the signings, I kind of liked a mix of all of them. I liked Zadarius Smith. This guy led the Ravens in sacks last year, and he was only a part-time starter. And we have seen recently that some of these Ravens that lead the team in sacks that are part-time players got big deals the next year. Hopefully he's the one that's able to pull through on that and can hopefully improve that defense for Green Bay. Preston Smith was a guy who's doesn't have the sack numbers, but does pressure the quarterback a lot, which is something Green Bay does definitely need to improve upon. I agree with you on Amos. I think that he can definitely help. That secondary safety was a big issue for them last year. As you had said, they had to convert Tramon Williams to safety. And then I like the signing of Billy Turner because offensive line has been an issue for Green Bay. They always have issues keeping those guys healthy. And Billy Turner's a guy that isn't just a one specific position on the offensive line. This guy has played both guard and tackle when he was with the Denver Broncos. So I think that could be a huge factor for the Green Bay Packers, getting some linemen, not just ones that play one position, but getting versatile linemen. A guy like Justin McCray, who was tended. I think this could be that could be a huge signing that people don't talk about.
Yeah, that's very possible. And I think more than anything, it shows that the Packers are actually in a win now sort of mode. Which is important because for years now, fans have seen Ted Thompson just not do anything and try to build through the draft, but then let those drafted players go after they just try them out for a few years. So it's nice to see them actually looking to bring in talent instead of trying to just build talent.
Yeah, I'm definitely loving what I've seen from I always can't get his last name right, so I'm just going to say Gutekunst. Yeah, Brian G. He's been doing the moves. I think this could be a good year for the Packers. Let's get on to some more free agent signings. We did see that Carlos Hyde, he is going from the Jags. He's now signed a 1-year deal with the Chiefs. We saw Tayshaun Gibson sign a deal with the Texans after he was let go by the Jaguars. Eric Weddle signed a 2-year deal with the Los Angeles Rams.
I think that could be a good one. Eric Weddle to the Rams brings some more experience to that Rams secondary. And even though Eric Weddle is getting a little bit older, he is still a big-time gamer.
And that's a big fill-in after they did lose LaMarcus Joyner, who signed with the Raiders. So I do think that could be a good move. This guy, despite being older, does play at a very high level still. I agree. We saw Thomas Davis, who was let go by the Panthers, sign a one-year deal with the Chargers. Latavius Murray, formerly with the Vikings, signs a four-year deal with the Saints, more than likely ending the time there for Mark Ingram, who is yet to be signed. John Brown proved his deal right with the Ravens last year. He gets a 3-year, $27 million deal with the Buffalo Bills, who also signed Cole Beasley to a 4-year deal. We saw the Arizona Cardinals get Jordan Hicks, who was formerly with the Philadelphia Eagles. We saw Antoine Bethea, formerly with the Cardinals, signed with the Giants. So they get him and then Jabril Peppers to play two safety slots. That could be huge for them. We saw former Redskins offensive lineman Ty, I believe it's pronounced Niseki, signed with the Buffalo Bills. Former Rams offensive lineman Roger Saffield signed with the Titans for 4 years. Bradley Roby, formerly with the Broncos, signed with the Houston Texans for a one-year deal, kind of like a prove-it deal after coming off an injury. The Falcons signed a couple of guards, both from New York, one with the Jets, James Carpenter, the other from the Giants, and Jamon Brown. We saw the Bucs sign ex-Cardinal safety Deon Buchanan to a one-year deal, reuniting with their head coach, Bruce Arians. The Cardinals then signed ex-Seahawks guard J.R. Sweezy to a 2-year deal. Cordero Patterson's going from New England to the Bears, signing a 2-year deal. The Steelers signed ex-Chiefs cornerback Steven Nelson to a 3-year deal. And then the last signing as of now for a player going to a new team is Cameron Wake. He was formed with the Dolphins. He signed a 3-year deal with the Tennessee Titans. Before we get on to the players that stayed with their teams, do you have any other immediate reactions to any of these signings?
My other reaction is that the Dolphins are continuing to get rid of their players. So Danny Amendola gone, and then Cameron Wake gone, which is interesting because they are looking kind of like they're tanking, to be honest. They didn't really bring anybody big in. They're not trying to fill holes. What do you think about that?
I definitely think that they are trying to get rid of some pieces. There are reports that Ryan Tannehill could be the next one to go. There are also reports that they were looking to get rid of Devontae Parker, but he's actually one that's expected to re-sign with the Dolphins. He's expected to get a 2-year deal to stay with Miami. He did play well down the stretch for them last year after kind of not playing for the most part early on. So I think some of these pieces they're realizing are going to be nice assets for the future, and Parker still is young. But some of these other pieces, like Danny Amendola, who's getting older, Cameron Wake, who's had a great career but has kind of slid down a little bit. I think getting rid of some of these players that are past their prime are definitely a good move for a team that is looking to rebuild over the next few years.
Yeah, and they look like it's going to be a hard rebuild. It's not even going to be a transition. It's going to be a legitimate drop everything and pick it up again with new players.
Yeah, a couple things I want to look at. I did miss that Broncos former center Matt Paredes signed a deal with the Panthers for 3 years, but the one team I'm kind of looking at is Buffalo. They signed 7 players already in free agency, a couple of nice pieces on defense, and then getting some wide receiver help for Josh Allen on offense. This team struggled passing the ball last year. It got to the point where Josh Allen had more fantasy points rushing than he did passing. That was because he didn't really have too many weapons. You sign a tight end in Tyler Kroft, who's had shown some good signs in Cincinnati. You get Cole Beasley, a solid slot wide receiver from the Cowboys. And then John Brown, who put up some good numbers last year for the Baltimore Ravens, averaged, I believe it was over 17 yards per catch. This guy is a deep threat down the field, and Josh Allen has a cannon of an arm. I think that Buffalo, not saying that they're going to be a great team next year, but this team's going to be a good team next year. They're going to compete in games, and they got Frank Gore. I think they're signing Frank Gore. I'm not sure if it's necessarily a deal to – because we really don't know what their situation looks like in the backfield. I think they're going to look to draft a running back this year and possibly look to have Gore mentor that running back for the future.
Yeah, they were somehow actually competitive in a lot of games last year, and this free agency period should hopefully only enhance that situation for them. It is really important that they brought in some veteran receivers that actually know what they're doing. John Brown should be a great signing. And Cole Beasley, even though he wasn't really as good as people were expecting last year, has shown flashes of brilliance for sure in his career. Obviously with the Cowboys for I think almost all of it. So they should help Josh Allen out. It's going to be nice to have receivers that know how to run routes better than what they had last year.
Yeah, I definitely agree. So I think Josh Allen's definitely going to improve in the passing game now. So that's definitely going to be something to see because he is an exciting talent to watch. Now we're going to talk about some players that did re-sign with their current teams, or I should say are expected to re-sign once the new league year does start. We saw the Raiders, they keep Jonathan Haskins, the defensive tackle, on the 2-year deal. Dante Fowler Jr., after getting traded to the Rams, stays there. He'll get a 1-year deal for $12 million. The Giants keep their offensive lineman Spencer Puller for 3 years. Jason Peters gets a 1-year, $10 million deal to stay with the Eagles. The Bears signed a backup tight end, Ben Braunecker, to a 2-year deal. Bobby Hart from Cincinnati gets a 3-year deal to stay there. Kenny Vaccaro gets a nice 4-year deal as well, $26 million to stay with the Tennessee Titans. We also saw Cincinnati keep C.J. Uzomah to a 3-year deal. He's a tight end. Nick Boyle, tight end for the Ravens, also got a 3-year deal. As I mentioned, Devontae Parker staying with the Dolphins. Zach Zenner gets a 1-year deal to come back to the Lions. The Browns keep wide receiver Brashad Perriman on a 1-year deal. Bengals also keep linebacker Preston Brown for 1 year. The Jets also get defensive end Henry Anderson for 3 years. Are any of these big deals for you, Ryan?
Not particularly. A lot of these guys were sort of second string players. None of them are that huge. I guess the biggest for me would be Jason Peters back to the Eagles. I think he is an important piece in that locker room. Obviously, a big time veteran talent who, in spite of having some injury issues the past couple of seasons, is great to have on that team and back in the lineup.
Yeah, I look at the defensive side for a couple of these. I like Dante Fowler. He got a good deal, $12 million for 1 year for the Rams. Got traded there midseason. Guy can definitely get sacks and be a big pressure on quarterbacks for third down. So I think he proved it last year after the trade, and he got another deal to kind of prove it again. And then I like Kenny Vaccaro. I've always been a fan of him since he's been with New Orleans. So the fact that he gets basically a solid deal for 4 years to stay in Tennessee, it's definitely going to be something that helps bolster that team, which had a pretty solid defense last year.
Yeah, that's a good point. I just don't see any of these guys as really like huge signings. I think they're more like bit players, sort of. But still good to get those guys back with their teams.
Sure. We also had some other trades that happened this past week in the NFL. We saw the Jets sign guard Kelechi Osemele and a 6th-round pick to the that's who the Jets got. They got that from the Raiders, who in return get a 5th-round pick. We saw Deshaun Jackson, another wide receiver that got traded from Tampa, goes back to Philadelphia, who also get a 7th-round pick in 2020. The Eagles in return send Tampa a 6th-round pick this year. The Eagles traded Michael Bennett in a 2020 7th-round pick to the Patriots for a 5th-round pick in 2020. We'd already talked about the Giants trading Olivier Vernon for Kevin Zeitler. Steelers traded offensive lineman Marcus Gilbert to the Cardinals for a 6th-round pick this year. And a trade that also happened this past week, the Broncos, they traded quarterback Case Keenum and a 2020 7th-round pick to the Redskins for a 2020 6th-round pick. What are your thoughts on that trade?
I mean, that could be kind of a Band-Aid for if they decide to draft another quarterback or to fill in until Alex Smith gets back. Because we've seen Case Keenum his entire career now. He's been pretty average. He had one really good season with the Vikings that got him a big deal in Denver. But I think we know that he's kind of just a backup type quarterback. He's not going to be a franchise quarterback. So he's going to be sort of just a Band-Aid, like I said, right now.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting trade just because they have Colt McCoy there. It's not looking like Alex Smith could possibly play this year. So it's basically another last chance for Keenum. Can he put up a good opportunity in Washington? I think he could win that starting job. It's just a matter of if he's able to find success with the talent that is around him. The Deshaun Jackson one's interesting because it was rumored that he had sat down with Coach Bruce Arians before the trade. It seemed like they were on good terms, but it still seemed like Tampa was looking to shop him. And he goes back to the Eagles, which is a huge win for them. And I think that could rejuvenate his career a little bit because he had some great success there and then was let go after having a dominant year when Chip Kelly was there. So I think that could be a huge move for the Eagles.
Yeah, I don't know if it would be a huge move necessarily, but it's definitely interesting to have him back where he had the biggest boom in his career.
Yeah, I definitely think it could rejuvenate him, but obviously, I don't think he is like an all-pro caliber wide receiver anymore. But definitely someone that could help provide experience. It could be a huge factor for a team that makes the playoffs. We also did have some cuts in the NFL this past week. We saw the Vikings get rid of offensive lineman Mike Remmers and safety Andrew Sendejo. The Cardinals cut tight end Jermaine Gresham. The Browns released tight end Darren Fells. The Lions released cornerback Nevin Lawson. And then one that most recently happened, the Packers, they released linebacker Nick Perry. Which one of those kind of stands out to you the most?
I guess the Nick Perry release sort of stood out because it wasn't too long ago that he was actually a pretty solid player for the Packers. He just had injury after injury, hasn't been able to produce on the field. He was a guy that was expected to be really, really strong, but it just never lived up to the hype.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one. When he was healthy and dominated a couple years ago, it seemed like the Packers were going to maybe give him a 1 year prove it deal. And instead, they gave him a big deal. And unfortunately, he wasn't able to live up to that because of injuries, which has been a big factor for him throughout his career. So wherever he does end up, it's probably going to, I suspect him getting a 1 year deal somewhere kind of to prove that he can still be a big time player. And if he can stay healthy, then he might get paid next year. But it's all going to depend on who's going to give him that chance.
Yeah, absolutely. And some team will give him that chance, but it'll be up to him to actually show that he's capable of still playing at a high level.
And then there was one other news which I thought was interesting. So the Patriots, they tendered wide receiver Josh Gordon, who is currently suspended by the NFL, which basically means is if he does end up getting reinstated in the NFL, it's kind of, if you follow the NBA, what the tender means, it's from what I got, it's kind of like restricted free agency in the NBA. So in restricted free agency, any team has the right to offer a deal to a certain player, and then the team that has or when it's restricted, that means the team he was originally with has the option to match that offer. So that's basically what is with the Josh Gordon and the Patriots right now. Basically, if he does get reinstated, any team can make an offer for him and can offer to sign him, and then the Patriots have a certain time frame to possibly sign him. Was this a little interesting for you, or do you think that it's just because it's really dead money here?
I definitely found this to be very odd with the Patriots because it seemed like they were done with Josh Gordon. It seemed like the league was done with Josh Gordon. The guy got suspended for like the umpteenth time. And yet still here we are talking about him playing again in the NFL and a team actually being interested in him. So they must have seen enough in him to think that he's a valuable enough asset that they're going to stick it out with him.
Yeah, and I think that it's not a terrible thing to do for them. Obviously, we're not sure what his career looks like going forward, but if he ends up getting reinstated at some point, obviously they can look at his value, and if someone's willing to pay for him, they'll let him go. But if no one's really willing to offer him much, they can keep him and maybe have a steal for the future. But I guess it's going to depend on when he does actually get that opportunity to come back to the league.
And that was sort of what we talked about this year, was that Josh Gordon could be a steal, but he once again proved that he's not up to the task of being healthy enough to compete at that sort of level and focused enough.
Definitely. So let's move on to a player who has yet to be signed. That's Le'Veon Bell. There are reports that he could possibly sign pretty soon. He actually does have an album that's expected to come out within the next few minutes or so. But there are reports that it seems like possible landing spots for him could either be the Oakland Raiders, the Baltimore Ravens, the Green Bay Packers, the Indianapolis Colts were also rumored, the Jets, and the Bears. So of all those teams, which one do you think will end up getting Le'Veon?
I honestly think it could be the Raiders, because the Raiders are looking to bring in a ton of people all of a sudden that are going to be big names. They're going to be big draws when they make that move to Las Vegas. So we saw Antonio Brown. I would not be surprised at all if we see a reunion between Le'Veon Bell and Antonio Brown, this time in Oakland instead of Pittsburgh. I think the team that he would make the most sense for is the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts had a lot of success with Marlon Mack last year, but they have a great offense suddenly with a great offensive line. Their defense overachieved last year and is looking to be even better and continue that strong performance. And if you add Le'Veon Bell to that equation, a really dynamic running back that can pass catch and carry the ball probably more than any other running back can and has over the past 2 or 3 seasons minus last year, that's going to be a recipe for success in Indianapolis with Andrew Luck, who had a monstrous season.
And I think that would be a good destination for him. And I was looking at some of his tweets because there were reports that he could have possibly came out with the news today. I was talking to people about it. I was looking at some of the tweets they had posted recently, trying to get a hint at where he could possibly go. And I was kind of leaning towards Oakland because obviously it could be the reunion with Antonio Brown. But if you look at the album he's set to drop, the cover of the album represents, I believe it shows him rolling the dice. It says Gambler on it. And I really thought, he's going to Oakland because where did they go next year? Las Vegas, where they can do all that gambling and stuff. So it made the perfect sense that he was going to drop that at midnight, and the first song was going to be about him going to Oakland. But I was on social media. Apparently one of his friends had said that he knows where he's going to be going, and he actually dropped a tweet that talked about how he wasn't going to be with the Steelers no more. He said something about a bird, and then he showed a clip of an Edgar Allan Poe poem. And you want to know what is one of the most famous poems from Edgar Allan Poe? The Raven, or stories from Edgar Allan Poe. So I think now that he's going to end up with Baltimore, Baltimore's looking to obviously get some upgrades. They lost a lot. You have a young quarterback. They really don't know how the running back situation looks now after releasing Alex Collins. I think that signs are now pointing that he's going to sign with Baltimore, and he's going to try playing. And he's doing this to kind of get after the Steelers. He wants to play the Steelers twice a year. He wants to show them that he deserves the money that he should have got from the Steelers. He knows that he could have ended up being a franchise player for the rest of his career with the Steelers, but because they didn't pay him the money that he wanted, he's not going to get that from a division rival, and he's going to have to put that up with the Steelers twice a year, possibly 3 times a year if they get to a playoffs together. I think he's going to end up now at Baltimore.
So you're saying it's going to be basically a spite move?
I think so, yes. Baltimore does have money now after after a lot of their free agents got let go. I think that he could get some more money elsewhere. I heard the Jets are trying to make a last minute move for him, but I just think after all this, signs are pointing that he's going to go to Baltimore. And there are reports also that he's a big fan of Baltimore as well.
It's quite possible he goes to Baltimore, but I don't think that move is going to significantly impact that team. I think Lamar Jackson is going to have to get better as a passer before they can actually move forward. And I don't know that a good running back is really going to improve that situation a whole lot.
Very true. They need to get some upgrades on that team after everything they've lost in free agency right now, especially on defense. But getting Antonio Brown could just be the start of that. Could get some other free agents to possibly come to Baltimore, but that's just something we'll have to wait and see as the NFL free agent period continues to roll on. But I think one of the big news that has happened so far in free agency, we had a player flip-flop teams, or at least we thought we did. It appeared that linebacker Anthony Barr was set to leave Minnesota and go to the Jets and get paid. And then all of a sudden, a day later, he said, no, I'm going to sign back with the Vikings. And he pulled kind of a flip-flop. He double flip-flopped, actually, if you think about it. What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I think it's a testament for how much people don't want to go play for the Jets, because he was all set to go to New York, and then he thought better of it, and he's like, man, do I really want to go play in New York and play for the Jets, and decided otherwise on it. I don't know. There's not a whole lot to go in here. I would just look at it as if he was re-signed to the Vikings without looking at that Jets piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, here's how I think about it. Obviously, we know Anthony Barr very well because he plays in the same division with the played in the same division with the Packers, and he most notably caused the injury that kind of hurt the Packers season a couple seasons ago. I've always been a fan of him. I liked him at UCLA when he was there, and I've always been a fan of his talent. And I'm kind of hoping that he doesn't fall in the same path as we've seen in the NBA with DeAndre Jordan. DeAndre Jordan, when he was with the Clippers, had an opportunity to sign a huge deal with the Dallas Mavericks a few summers ago. Had it all agreed up, and then all of a sudden, last minute, Clippers reached out to him, and what did he do? He went back to the Clippers. And what ended up happening? He still ended up going to Dallas a year later, signing with them. I hope that Anthony Barr is making the right decision here. I really hope that he gets a good deal with Minnesota. Those terms weren't disclosed at the time, but if he gave up more money to go to Minnesota, stay in Minnesota, and then next year he ends up going to New York, if things were to happen that way, I think it would be a mistake by him. So I'm just hoping he makes the right decision. I think he sees a more win now mode in Minnesota than he does in New York. But I'm just hoping that he knows what he did. It's going to be hard for some teams to trust signing him now going forward if he does end up going to free agency again at some point soon, because of the fact.
It's kind of like Josh McDaniels. Josh McDaniels did the ultimate flip-flop where he was actually hiring coaches with the Colts and then decided to go back to the Patriots. I mean, that didn't really stop him from being viewed as a candidate this year for coaching. So I think if a team really wants Anthony Barr, they would go after him still, regardless of the flip-flop situation.
Yeah, that's definitely something we'll have to see. It'll be interesting to see what the exact deal is that he does get with Minnesota. Is it the same amount of years? Is it less money? It'll be interesting to see how that looks. But, Ryan, it's time to move on. Let's go from everything in free agency to a little bit about the draft. So this past week, we had tweeted our question of the week, which focused around the Arizona Cardinals and the first pick. Basically, it was just summing up what are they going to do with the first pick. And with all the buzz in free agency, there wasn't as much response to this one, which is definitely understandable. But we did see a little bit of mixed results. We had a 50-50 split on Facebook or on Twitter in regards to if they should keep it or trade it. On Facebook, it was actually a 100%. They should actually, I believe it was trade the pick. So what are your thoughts on this? Or actually, it was keep the pick. So what do you think they should keep the pick, or do you think they should trade it?
I think they should trade the pick. The Arizona Cardinals obviously are a team that needs a lot of holes filled. If they were a team that, say, just needed a quarterback, then I would say keep the pick, take a quarterback, or just had one need that they needed filled. But they have so many needs on that team that they need to try and maximize the amount of picks that they have and not necessarily focus on just getting one guy. So if they can take that draft pick and turn it into a first and a second even, or, a first and a third would be fine too. Just get as many draft picks as you can in this draft and accumulate your prospects, because you need guys for the future. You are not in win now mode, so it's not going to do a whole lot of good to get one phenomenal prospect instead of two decent prospects at this point.
Yeah, and you look at the position they're in, and even someone who was a man in free agency, it's kind of hard to tell where they might want to go, because they did sign a couple of defensive players, but one was only to a long-term deal. The other was Terrell Suggs, who was just a one-year deal. And they did sign J.R. Sweet to improve the offensive line. I think that if they keep the pick, they're either going to go with Nick Bosa. I don't see them drafting a quarterback with the first pick. If they do draft a quarterback, it's going to be through a trade. If they do trade as well, they could also look at a couple of defensive players. I think, though, just right now, they kind of need to look at keeping the pick, getting the best available option. I don't think quarterback's going to be that option. I still think that they need to see how Josh Rosen's going to develop. You can't just let the guy go after drafting him in the first round after 1 year. You have to let him develop over time, and they didn't have the best pieces last year on that team. You have to get what's best right now for them, and I think getting either a Nick Bosa, a Montez Sweat, a Rashawn Gary, getting one of those guys is going to propel that defense into the future. I think they should keep it for now. If something else drastic happens at free agency, though, I could see them making more sense to trade it.
Yeah, I just think that they need to find a way to get more value for it, because I think it has more value as a commodity of a pick rather than who they actually take. because I think that if they don't want, a Nick Bosa, or if there's somebody else that they're eyeing, they could definitely move back and take that player while still getting some extra value for it.
Yeah, that's something that I think is going to be a big factor for them to think about over these next couple weeks. We're a little over a month away from the draft, so they still have lots of time to think about it. Heck, they have till basically the clock starts on the NFL draft to think about it. So they have plenty of time, and it'll just be interesting to see what does end up happening with them. So that's something to keep an eye out for over the next few weeks as we lead into the NFL draft. So let's switch topics now. Let's go to the Alliance, which is just getting past the halfway point of the season. And this past week, we saw some interesting outcomes. Your Orlando Apollos stayed undefeated. They got a big win on the road against the Birmingham Iron. So obviously, I know you're impressed about that. You're a big Orlando Apollos guy. I was a fan of the Birmingham Iron, and I'm at that point where I'll say it. I agree with you. Orlando's the best team in this league.
I'm glad that you finally agree with me on that. Now that you said that, they'll probably lose. But I'm glad that you finally admit it.
That's something that could possibly happen. Especially, they do have a tough matchup this week against the Arizona Hotshots, who have been struggling recently. They did lose this past week. We also saw the Atlanta Legends get a win over the Memphis Express. And then we saw the San Diego Fleet win a crazy game against the Salt Lake Stallions in a game that was actually won on a field goal as time expired. Mike Berkovicki, the backup quarterback, helped lead them to victory in that game. We also did see in the Iron and Apollos game, Trent Richardson scoring another touchdown. He has scored a touchdown every week for the Birmingham Iron. Do you have any other thoughts about this past week in the Alliance, Ryan?
I think you covered it pretty well. The big thing to me is that there's still the Apollos who are undefeated. There's still the Memphis Express and the Salt Lake Stallions who are at the bottom at 1-4. And then it's really anybody's guess on what's going to happen with those other teams in the middle. The Iron are 3-2, San Diego's 3-2, Arizona's 2-3, and the Legends are 2-3.
Yeah, that's something to keep an eye out for. The Commanders did get a big one against Arizona, as I mentioned before. So that's something to keep an eye out for. But let's move on to Week 6. So we got some big games on the schedule ahead of Week 6. As I had mentioned, the Apollos hosting the Hotshots and the primetime game on Saturday. We got the 1-4 Express against the 1-4 Stallions. We have the Commanders going on the road to the Atlanta Legends, and then the Birmingham Iron go to San Diego to verse the Fleet. So who do you have this week for your picks, Ryan?
Okay, I'm going Memphis, Orlando, San Antonio, Birmingham. Picking all road teams except for my Apollos to defeat Arizona at home.
Okay. I figured you were going to go with the Apollos. Is there a reason why you went with all the road teams? Do you just have a gut feeling? Or?
Well, I think that Memphis is slightly better than Salt Lake. I've liked what Memphis has done, even though Salt Lake's coming off a narrow loss to a pretty solid team. I've liked what San Antonio's done. The Atlanta Legends, I haven't been crazy about watching them play so far. And then I could really see the Birmingham-San Diego game going either way, but I do like the personnel that Birmingham brings to that matchup better than I do San Diego.
Fair point there. I agree with you. I think the Apollos and the Iron won this week. I'm going to go with the Stallions at home against the Express. I think that this team is solid offensively. They just haven't been able to win some of these closer games. Then I like the Legends. I've liked how they've played with Aaron Murray at quarterback. I think that he's done very well throwing the ball and has also shown some mobility. So I think that could be a key factor against a tough San Antonio team. But I think they can pull it off. So let's move on to our fantasy picks for this week. So, Ryan, you had made the big pick last week, picking ex-Cowboys tight end Gavin Escobar from the Fleets. And Gavin Escobar got you a total of 0 points.
Total winning pick right there.
I picked Wes Saxon Jr. from the Iron, who actually led the Iron in receiving yards this past week. He had 75 yards on 3 catches. So I won this past week. I now lead the season standings by a total of 50 points to 27.
Yeah.
So this week, Ryan, we're actually going with a team pick. We're going to go with defense. So what team are you picking this week as your defensive pick for fantasy?
Ian, I want you to take a guess.
I want to say I know this. You've been a fan of them the whole time. You're going to go with the Apollos.
Yep, I'm going with the Apollos. And one of the big stats for that is I'm looking at total yards for defenses allowed. The Apollos rank number 2 right now in total yards allowed on defense. And they've been putting up a good enough stat line to win all of their games so far. Their offense is solid, so they're not giving as many chances as the opponents in good field position for the opponent. Interestingly enough, the team that leads in total yards allowed is the Atlanta Legends, which is kind of fascinating. But I'm going with the Apollos to win again over a Hotshots team that's come upon some hard times recently, and I expect their struggles to continue.
Yeah, it's surprising how much they have struggled. They were starting the season very well, but the injury to Walford, and then they just haven't been able to gel since he's come back. So I can definitely see that as a very good pick. If he does bounce back, could turn bad for you, but I do think that's
Which it undoubtedly will, because I apparently cannot pick to save my life for this.
True, but I mean, you are picking your team, so I think your team could possibly fall through for you this week. I'm gonna go with my team. I'm gonna go with the Birmingham Iron. And you look at some of these games that they've had recently, the offense hasn't been there, but the defense has been able to put up some numbers. And even though they did give up 31 points last week at home, I have faith in the Iron, even though it's on the road against a backup quarterback who did play well, but has shown the ability to be turnover prone. This guy had 5 turnovers in a scrimmage before the season started. So if they can cause a couple of turnovers, I think that it could be a huge factor for them. I think that the Iron could get a big win on the road, and I think that the defense is going to be a big part to it.
Plus, the Iron is a very good defense name. The Iron, it just sounds defensive.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you on that one. Also want to make a quick note. After you went 2-2, you actually won this week in our weekly picks. So that brings your season total to 9-11. I still lead overall though, but I'm up by 2 games now with a total of 11-9 after my picks for this week. So you're starting to catch me in the picks, and if you keep picking the Apollos, you might just pull ahead of me at some point.
Yeah, that's really the one thing I have is I pick the Apollos every week, I'm pretty sure, and that's just worked out for me. That's, more than half of my points have been picking the Apollos.
Yeah, and we'll see if they're able to keep that going for you this week. Like I said, a big matchup, primetime game Saturday against the Arizona Hotshots as they look to bounce back out, as they are currently on a 3-game losing streak. But we are getting to the end of the show, which means we are going to be talking about fantasy football. And we're going to be focusing it on 2 key impactful trades that happened recently. So we're each going to take a point on this. I'm going to let you take your first pick. So of the trades between Odell Beckham Jr. and Antonio Brown, of those 2, with their new teams, which one is going to have a bigger impact in fantasy football this year?
Man, it's really tough to know how this is all going to play out for these guys. I think that I'm going to go with Odell Beckham Jr. because I think the situation is going to be most comfortable for him. Because let's not forget, he played college football with Jarvis Landry. So those 2 are now lining up opposite of each other again, and I think they're going to have some good chemistry with helping to get one another open. With Antonio Brown, he's going to a Raiders team that doesn't really even have another solid target or an option to target in that offense, so he's going to be probably looking at a lot of double coverage. With the Browns, you can't necessarily do that anymore because you have a lot of players that people have to account for. I think that's going to open up Odell Beckham Jr. more than Antonio Brown will be opened up. I think that Derek Carr is still a better quarterback than Baker Mayfield. So I think that the passes that are coming to Antonio Brown might be a little more on target. But I just think the amount of people that are going to be covering him is going to be so much more than the ones that are covering Odell Beckham Jr.
You do make some good points on Odell Beckham, and I think that trying to double team him and possibly having to double team Landry at times is going to be very tough on him. I'm going to go with Antonio Brown here, though. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I think he's for sure going to get more throws thrown at him than Odell Beckham Jr. will because of the fact that Jarvis Landry is on that team. You look at Antonio Brown, he's the clear-cut number one option of that team. They still have Jordy Nelson, but Antonio Brown is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. And I'll say this, he's the best wide receiver at getting through double teams. This guy, when he does get double covered, can still make big plays out of nothing. You can keep him in motion, and then you can also throw in a reverse or something to keep him in the game. This guy's going to be a factor for that team no matter what, even if he is getting double teamed or even triple teamed at points, because that's how dynamic of a player he is. Even though he is starting to get up there in age, getting past 30, I think that he's going to be a huge factor for them. He is playing with the better quarterback right now in Derek Carr, and I think that now that Carr has a weapon who has been a superstar in this league that Brown has been, when Amari Cooper was there, obviously had his ups and downs after a solid rookie year. I think that Brown's going to put up some big fantasy numbers. I'm not sure if they're going to be where he was at with Pittsburgh, as I talked about before on the show, but I think that it's going to be big enough to do a lot better than Odell Beckham Jr. will.
And I think either one is very possible because there's an argument to be made that the fact that Antonio Brown is the guy is going to lead to more targets and receptions, and there's an argument to be made that Odell Beckham Jr. having somebody else to take away some of that coverage is going to make him a better fantasy option. And it's really anybody's guess at this point. Antonio Brown experienced great seasons when he was with Emmanuel Sanders lining up opposite of him. So it's really difficult to say which one is going to have a better season.
Yeah, very true. It'll be interesting to see how these two are able to build a relationship with their new quarterbacks and with their new surrounding talent around them. So that'll be something to keep an eye out for once the season does start. And now that we have concluded this week's episode, we can now say that free agents are at that point where they can officially sign. Le'Veon's Ball album has dropped, and we should probably know within the next few hours or so where he does end up. So with that said, that does conclude this week's episode. Ryan, what are your final thoughts before we end the show?
Thanks so much for following us and listening to us. As always, it's a very exciting time of year with free agents, and we can kind of see how some of these teams are starting to shape up. So keep glued to that Twitter feed. Ian is very quick about posting information on Twitter, and I'm sure as soon as anything comes out about Le'Veon Bell, you will hear about it first on that Bruce Sports and the Touchdown Tuesday Twitter.
Yeah, do want to thank everyone again for listening to this week's episode of Touchdown Tuesdays, the official football podcast of Bruce Sports. Make sure to check us out each week on iTunes, Google Play, and Spreaker. And if you want to check us out live, listen to us on YouTube each week as well. Feel free to check out our Facebook and Twitter pages where we'll have the most up-to-date NFL news and also our question of the week. I'm not sure what it'll be yet this week, but it sure should be a dandy with all this free agency news. Also, make sure to listen to our buddies Eric and Sam's NBA podcast, Run It Back. They've been off the last few weeks, but are expected to get a new episode up and running soon. We're also looking at getting our baseball podcast started soon, and hopefully we can get those episodes started for you within the next month or so with that season coming around. And again, just want to say thank you everyone for listening this week. We'll be back with you next week with the most recent news in the NFL, and hopefully we will know where Le'Veon Bell will be landing.